It's the 13th round of the FIDE Candidates 2026, and Anish Giri has a big task on his hand. He's talking with Jan Smeets and he's looking in good mood. Today, Anish has a final shot at becoming the World Championship challenger and winning the candidates because Javokhir Sindarov has a 2 point lead over him. But today it's Anish versus Javokhir. And you can see there Javokhir entering in as always with his second Mukhiddin Madaminov. Anish comes from the other side of the building while Javokhir comes from the other side. And Anish first enters in. He's always the early one to enter in the playing hall. In fact, I believe he's the first one to enter every single day. He likes to take his time. He likes to get into the zone of the playing hall. And that's one thing that you will always see different chess players have different preferences for. Some chess players prefer to take their time, get ready, move around, get into the flow of things, while some want to come at the last minute. In fact, some even after the last minute, like we had Bobby Fischer or Magnus Carlsen, they just prefer to come in and not stay in that high pressure area for a long time. But Anish, well, he's different. He comes in and he waits for his opponent, gets everything in order, adjusts his pieces, writes his score sheet, adjusts his clock, and there you see Javokhir entering in and walking backwards and shooting this. No easy task. A fist bump there, or you could say a high five, and now Javokhir enters in. And there you see a handshake. And Javokhir has been absolutely amazing in this tournament. He's currently on 9 points out of 12. He has 6 wins and 6 draws, unbeaten. Anish, if you just leave out the first round, has also played incredibly well. And by the way, we have Isai Scheinberg here, who's going to make the first move. The man behind the sponsor of one of the major sponsors of the event. Pawn to e4 played, and he has really backed chess and was the supporter of Candidates 24 and now also the supporter of Candidates 2026. The players are now ready, a handshake, and off we go. This, dear friends, is the Lotus Chess game of the day. Lotus Chess is a very cool app. It helps you to improve your openings, and it does so in very interesting ways. You don't just learn by just watching, but you learn by making the moves. It asks you to repeat things, to find lines that are appropriate for your level, and also training that adapts to your style. So do check out the Lotus Chess app and download it from the link in the description. It is free for Android and iOS. Anish opens the game with pawn to d4. And Javokhir goes pawn to d5. And we have the Queen's Gambit with c4. The opening plays a very important role. e6 played by Sindarov. Queen's Gambit declined. Knight to c3. And now bishop comes out to e7. Anish takes on d5, cd. By the way, I'm pretty sure Anish has come well prepared for this line because Javokhir did play it against many players here. Bishop f4. And now knight to f6. We have pawn to e3. Just opening up the bishop. Black castles. And now bishop to d3 played. Just improving the position of the bishop. And pawn to c5. He strikes in the center very quickly. Javokhir here. But Anish is not surprised. He goes knight g e2. And asking Javokhir if he wants to push c4. He goes knight to c6 here. And now short castles, and bishop comes to g4, pinning the knight, threatening to take on d4 and put pressure here. So Anish takes on c5, bishop takes on c5, and now h3. The bishop takes the knight on e2, because if bishop h5, g4 is something which needs to be handled very carefully. So takes knight e2 and now pawn to d4. Look at Sindarov's speed. He's at 159. He's come well prepared. This has been one of the best things about Javokhir in this tournament. Anish pushes forward with e4. He could have also added rook c1 as a move. But now this position gets very interesting, because Anish has an imbalance. He has a kingside majority, f4. If he gets in, well, that would be strong. Rook e8, putting pressure on e4. Anish goes knight g3, showing that he is also well prepared. And now Javokhir, his first think here, and finds knight d7. The idea is to put the knight on e5 and attack the d3 bishop. a3 played here. And knight to e5, putting pressure on the bishop on d3. And Anish takes. Maybe instead of a3, he could have started off with bishop c4. I like this idea to put the bishop on d5. But a3 now takes, knight takes, and f4. So he's got the central pawns rolling. Knight takes d3 and queen takes d3. So with this, two pawns in the center are very strong. And the pawn on d4 is blocked. The bishop is not active, but Javokhir finds queen b6, putting pressure on b2. A good way to defend is rook f2 to defend this pawn. But Anish moves ahead. He pushes e5. And he's like, Javokhir, if you take here, I go knight e4, threatening rook fb1 to trap the queen. You have to go back, and then rook b1, I have good compensation. Javokhir does not even flinch about taking this pawn. He goes queen a6, a very well played move. Excellent move, sort of destabilizing the queen on d3. Queen takes d3, queen takes a6 taken, b takes a6. Doubled pawns here, and look at Anish's expression. He's like, wow, is this something even worth playing? And knight e4. I think if you look visually, white's position starts to look really nice. The knight is coming in, the pawns are doubled, rook c1, rook d1. But if you go deeper, you realize that f6 is being threatened. All of a sudden, d3 can come to activate this bishop. The rook can move to the c file and come in here. So many active ideas that black has. Knight to d6 played, attacking the rook on e8. And rook to e6, with the idea of pushing forward with f6. The knight goes back to c4, putting pressure on the bishop on b6. And maybe one of Anish's idea is that the knight is very solidly placed on c4. And f6, Javokhir finds it. Is once you cannot dislodge the knight defends the pawn on e5. Rook a d1 played. And now f takes on e5. F takes e5. and black goes rook d8, defending the pawn here, and Anish plays rook f4. This does remind us a little bit of Anish's game against Pragnananda, where there was a very good knight against a not so great bishop. But Javokhir is very careful. He gives a check, he opens up the bishop, he's going bishop c7 next, rook d5, and he's going to attack the e5 pawn. And in order to save the e5 pawn, if you move your rooks around, then suddenly the d pawn becomes very strong. Bishop to c7, attacking the pawn on e5, and he goes rook e4, defending it. And now rook to d5 played. Strong move. Now this is the problem that Anish had. If somehow he had his king on d2 or something, he could have defended it very carefully. But now if you go rook e1, I'll have d2 coming in, and then you lose this pawn. So king f2, and now Javokhir snatches the pawn. There's no dangerous pin here, because if you do this, I always have a check. So that doesn't work at all. Anish now chops off the bishop on e5. So the pieces are coming off. Rook takes e5, knight takes e5, rook takes e5, and rook takes d3. So white does have something here with better structure, but I don't think it's enough. And Javokhir simply goes rook to b5, because if check, check here and take here, then rook takes b2 check comes in. So b3 played, or maybe b4. I'm wondering what's the best way to continue here. b4, he goes b3 calmly, defends the pawn here. Anish is not in a hurry, because b4 could have been met with a5. So b3, king comes up. One of the things that you will always notice in Sindarov's games is that he keeps his pieces active always. The king is out, and now the rook goes back to b7. So white's dream scenario somewhere could be to bring the king in here, keep the pawn defended, and rook d6 to attack the a6 pawn. If he manages to do that, he could potentially keep trying in this position. And so Anish does have some kind of a plan. But Javokhir gets his king in a way that the rook does not have any squares on the d file anymore. Anish gives a check. Now whether to put the rook king on f6 or d6 is a question. King d6. Javokhir is very confident. He goes king d6. He's just few moves away from winning this candidates tournament. So naturally he should be excited here, king d2. But Anish is making sure that he can use all of this excitement against him. Look at Anish's focus, a5. And now rook g3, keeping the pressure on g7. And Javokhir goes g6. Oh, just one more move, king c2. And then he goes king c3. Now, if you are not careful, then rook g5 could lead to a loss of pawn. So rook c7 check. King goes back to b2. Now maybe rook c5. Yeah, rook c5 played. Beautiful move, stopping the rook from coming ahead. White goes pawn to h4. And now rook to e5. Anish goes rook g4. I was wondering if you take here, this is a drawn endgame, so this is also not worth trying. So rook g4, king comes up to c6. And now rook to c4 check. The king goes to d6. Ooh, he's a bit confused there. Anish definitely putting some doubts in Javokhir's mind. And more than like the position, Anish is also playing the situation, because you want to get quickly done with this, but Anish is like, no, wait, I'll make you play another 50 moves. g4. And now Javokhir gives a check. So the most logical thing to do is go here, but then another check, then you come here, another check. So you don't want to really trap your king here on a3, because now you see there's no way to get out. And Sindarov goes h6. Anish gives a check. So the point is, if you go to e6, the a5 pawn is a little soft. If you go to c6, then rook f4 to f6 could become an idea. So you can see Javokhir going king here. And now rook f4. His idea is to give a check. Rook h2, attacking the pawn here. g5, he pushes forward. The thing is, if you give a check, king b7 and takes here, then take and y, it's equal. So g5, hg, hg. Oh, first he gives a check. King goes back and now takes. So Anish at least wins a pawn here. But look at Javokhir's understanding. He's like, you take the pawn, but your king is locked in. And in order to unlock it, you need to play b4 when I give you a check and ab4 is hanging. So a6 played. Rook g8. King a7. And all that Javokhir is planning now to do is wait on these two squares. b7, a7. Check, king goes up. And Anish knows that now, in spite of winning the pawn and having everything well figured out, it's not going to help him, because he goes rook a7. Okay, don't take this pawn. That would be just game over. King b6. Rook goes back to g7. King c6. He goes again to attack, and it's a repetition happening. Javokhir Sindarov is super close here. They've repeated several times now. Sindarov is like, I need to claim a draw now. A draw is agreed. Javokhir Sindarov becomes the FIDE Candidates Champion 2026 and earns the right to challenge Domaraju Gukesh in the World Championship match 2026. It's a huge achievement for Sindarov in his career. Anish tried his level best to stop his opponent, but Javokhir today was solid as a rock. He gave his opponent absolutely no chances. Anish putting back all the pieces there, and now Javokhir comes out first, greeted with a handshake by the FIDE CEO Emil Sutovsky, hugs his trainers Roman Vidoniak and Madaminov, and now comes here outside and goes to the media room. Javokhir Sindarov is being interviewed by Mike Klein, and I'll leave you with the emotions there.
Fine. Played well game. It was such a nice tournament. I'm very happy.
As well, you should. Congratulations and all tears.
Thank you.
Javokhir, are you holding back your tears right now?
Sorry?
Are you holding back your tears right now?
I don't understand.
Are you holding back to cry? Do you want to cry?
No.